how do we effectively manage change in our organization and as leaders bring people on board when we're going through these big transformations? Today, I have the absolute privilege of speaking with Sheena Peeters, who has had the most incredible career from managing consulting to running her own business to working in big corporates. Sheena has done and seen it all, which is why she is so equipped with so many amazing skills that she speaks about on today's podcast. She goes into the future of technology. She goes into conscious leadership. We talk about how seasons of life are so important, how aligning your work to your values, how and why flexible working conditions are so important, especially for females. So I know that you're going to have so many breakthroughs in today's podcast, so many takeaway moments. So let me know what your biggest takeaway was. And I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Enjoy. Sheena, welcome to the Career Confidence Podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have you on today. We are going to have an amazing conversation, but before we get stuck into all the nuts and bolts of your roles and what you've been working on, I would love to first and foremost get a bit of a snapshot into your career journey and also what brought you here today. It's like, why are you in this position you're in now? So Sheena, great to have you. Over to you.
I love this. It's such a broad question, isn't it? I always like to start with this story, right? So when I was in year 10, I went on work experience, and it was I went to an organization that had supercomputers. So these were the days, of course, now I'm showing my age, where the computers were like, floor to ceiling in size. And the company that I went and worked for, did my work experience with, they did seismic processing. So at the time, they were checking under the water to lay what is now broadband, what is now cable, right? Internet cable that we use across the Tasman, etc. So it was actually really eye-opening for me. And so that kind of led me in some ways to my career journey. I realized that I really was I'm a bit of a geek, Georgie, deep down. And I love solving problems. So I started my career in management consulting. I think it was a really great start. Gave me the opportunity to just do a really large variety of, different types of work, looking at different types of problems across different organizations in different industries, actually. And whilst I've specialized, maybe not specialized, but my predominant industry has been financial services, I've also been able to work across airline and energy sector and health, etc. So it's been, it was a really great start, a really great exposure to, to that career in technology, but also in how organizations go about solving problems. I then did a little bit of switch and started working more in organizations themselves in different leadership roles. And along the way, I also built my own startup. So all of these things, I think, collectively have, just brought me to a couple of things. One, I see the value in real, what I call involved leadership, leading by setting the pace, not just leading by, setting instruction, I think. The second one is that ways of working plays a massive role in how we succeed and bringing people on the journey. I think that's, when you own your own business, one of the things or create a startup, you're often the person that believes in it the most. And you've got to convince a whole heap of other people that, it's worthwhile them coming on this journey with you. And I think if there's anything I've learned from that experience is, taking people on the journey, engaging and bringing teams and people with you actually helps with that success part. So that's sort of where I'm at today.
That's a very interesting journey, and you've done so much and experienced so much. And when I speak to people on the podcast, I'm always trying to pick I guess my theory is success leaves clues. So I'm always trying to pick patterns and clues. And I think what's really interesting about your journey that you just said then is how you were exposed at such a young age to these big computers. You saw the internet cables being laid and what that would have done to your mind. And then you said the word solving problems. And most people that have gone into technology have gone into technology because they really enjoy solving problems. So let's talk about this, right? Because I think this is super powerful and this doesn't get talked about enough in tech, because I think when people think tech, they think coding, but actually there's so much more to technology. And one of the biggest things that I see that I guess people then step up into leadership roles in technology is this problem solving mindset. So can you just give a few examples of when you sort of stepped into a role and how your problem solving nature, the technology experience have really helped shape that organization and create great high performing teams?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably been my last 15 years in my journey. And partly, I think some of the key or core capabilities in there is curiosity, right? And the second one is knowing that it can be done. So if you think about the problems that we solve problems for customers, people, right? We solve problems for employees. And often we talk a lot about the customer experience, but an employee, a person that works for an organization, plays a fundamental role in contributing to that organization. And there are so many ways in which technology can make their role and what they do and the functions that organizations participate and perform so much more effective and efficient. And lastly, the role that organization plays in its community and industry. And for me, solving problems is about those different dimensions. It's making people's lives easier. It's enabling people to engage with that organization, whether it's for a product or a service. It's helping our employees do their best work, right? And it's helping organizations advance, grow, scale. It depends on what the goal of that organization is, right? So for some, it's about shareholder return. For others, it's about being competitive and growing and scaling. For others, it's about their community contribution. But ultimately, the culmination of those different things is how do we use technology to enable all those things, right? And empower those different objectives, whether it's for a customer, whether it's for an employee, or whether it's for that organization's ultimate objective.
I completely agree. And I think technology is going to be a huge part of everyone's future. And when you actually understand like how much we use technology just every day to day, like with the women I speak to, especially who have got this sort of fixed mindset of what tech is, I always say to them, well, look at you now, you're using your phone, you're using your laptop, you're going on websites, and we just need to make these shifts. But you're right, it's an enabler. It's tech to me it empowers people. Right? Like that is so powerful. I want to talk about, look, one thing that keeps on coming up with a lot of the people that I speak with, the hiring managers, is this real focus on leadership. And you are very passionate about this as well. So I'd love to sort of like talk to you about your sort of philosophy on leadership, what makes a good leader, and how that can really shape a culture as well. So I'd love to get your thoughts on leadership.
I think ultimately the goal of leadership is to help people be their best. That's the ultimate goal. And for me, if I reflect on your previous question around, what problems have I had the opportunity to solve? And therefore, the ability to build high performing teams to engage that, it ultimately comes down to how you lead. I've solved a couple of large problems that I've had the opportunity to participate in is, in the banking sector, I've played a significant role in how we've revolutionized, I suppose, or evolved the way that we leverage and make payments, right? So if you think about how little we use cash today and how quickly we can move money around, I mean, that's a significant change in the way we used to participate in buying things, in transacting. If I think about my more recent experience in superannuation, this idea of being able to digitize so our community and people can engage with super in a more readily available way. What we know in super is that, when people inquire and they access the right information and they actually take action, it directly contributes to the retirement outcome that they, land on. And we want to see people do well, right, in retirement. So throughout their life and their participation with the superannuation process, we want to see people do well. So for me, when I think about leadership, and if I look at that example, one, it's about setting the strategy and particularly the IT strategy. And I don't like to specifically think about IT as a strategy in its own right. It is very much a core part of the overall business strategy and how the business plays a role in what it's doing for its customers, what it's doing for its employees. And if we think about where it wants to be in the role it plays in industry, your IT strategy, our IT strategy plays a significant role in that. Now, what is the role of what style of leadership do I like to play in then driving that strategy to its success? Very much an active role. I think that for me, a technical leader or a technology leader today is a real orchestrator between business and technology. It's playing that real orchestration and collaborative role in helping our business, our stakeholders, our board understand the value of things like cloud, data, AI, the things that we talk about today, and then working very collaboratively with the technology teams and business stakeholders to bring that to life. Those parties have to work together. I think traditionally we've had this business of, throwing things over the fence to technology or technology running off and doing things in silo. But ultimately, the role that I see, particularly technical leaders, is in bringing those solutions to life. It's understanding, very much being at the table in the conversations around business strategy, understanding the problems that organizations are really trying to solve, and then educating and empowering the business in understanding the power that technology can play in solving them. So let's look at a couple of examples in there. So for example, cloud. There are so many examples of cloud, right? If we think that innovation and experimentation is important to an organization, traditionally it takes a long time to participate in that process because, technology teams also they run the business, they plan the business, and they build the business, right? So if we think about it in that lens, so if they're busy running the business, they're running operations and they're taking care of the tech and they're patching and they're, taking care of people's passwords and etc., then how are they participating in solving problems? Well, maybe let's say we're trying to experiment in different ideas. Well, to build infrastructure for an experiment could take, traditionally it used to take 12, 18 plus weeks, could cost a couple of $100,000. So to get the justification for that experiment, given that we want to follow a fast fail methodology, can often become quite an expensive exercise. So if I go back to something like cloud, with cloud, if you set cloud up properly and leverage it properly, one, speed to value, you can scale really quickly, you can spin up environments, you can experiment and you can innovate and isolate out the types of problems you're trying to solve and the solutions that you want to use to solve them. So I think if I go back, why am I using that as an example? It's to enable us to empower and educate our leaders, our business leaders, in understanding the role that these technologies play in helping them be and achieve the outcomes that they want to.
That was amazing. And I completely agree. And I think that the key piece there that I thought, as you were speaking, I thought, wow, I bet that your experience in that consulting firm really set you up for success, because when you're sort of having to deal with multiple different people, multiple different businesses, you just learn so much about people, how to communicate, how to pitch, how to talk. And this is a really key piece, especially when it comes to technology. I think as leaders, it's the EQ piece that's becoming more and more important. And when I'm seeing the leaders step up, it's usually because they can communicate, they can talk to non-techies, they can problem solve, they've got they just have, again, these high levels of EQ. I think that is just becoming more increasingly important, especially at this rapid pace of change where you're constantly having to sort of pitch to a business to say, we need to do this, we need to innovate, we need to create this new piece of tech over here, because people are quite scared, and it's how you pitch it, it's how you sell it, it's how you communicate that to the business that's going to be absolutely crucial in the future as well. So I'm encouraging all leaders at the moment in tech to really keep on working on these softer skills, which I'm now calling critical skills, because this is what's going to make sure business innovate and move forward. Talking about business, can we talk about your entrepreneurial journey now? Because to go from working for someone else into running your own business, I've done it myself, is quite the journey. What have you learned about yourself through going through that experience and starting a company?
I think one of the key things is that you really have to believe in yourself, don't you? I think, and for anybody who started their own business, you're your biggest champion. Because for a little while, people don't understand what you're trying to do. You know, there's safety in the knowing the knowns. Is that the right thing? And then, you know, the problem or the thing with doing your own business is it's the unknowns, right? Like you don't know what you don't know, and people don't necessarily understand it either. So I think one of the first things is you've got to really believe in yourself. And sometimes that means you've got to have that conversation with yourself, you know, that really challenge the negative conversations by really talking to you. Like if you believe in it, then you can communicate that, right? For me, being prepared to make mistakes. I don't know about you, but I made a lot of mistakes along the way on reflection. And going forward, I think it's made me really comfortable with mistakes. I'm okay with mistakes. I would rather, and I think it's because I've reframed it for myself. I don't see a mistake as a form of failure. I actually see that as a form of success. I actually took the risk to try something. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Now, obviously, there are what I call, and you've probably learned this, the third thing is learning when you need to hustle. So the art of juggling and making quick decisions versus, I might have to percolate on this one a little bit more, right? So there are some things where you can kind of take a risk because the cost is not going to sink you or, you know, create a huge amount of burden for the business versus some things where you need to be a little bit more thoughtful because it's a bigger decision that you're making, particularly when you're bootstrapping or backing yourself. And I think I've really honed those skills. When you own your own business, you do learn those skills. And you make mistakes as you're learning them, which means that you actually get really good at where you can make quick decisions and where you need to kind of percolate the decision a little bit more. And I find myself applying that now all the time. That's probably a skill I've learned. And this idea we've just talked about, which is the soft skills, which is learning to explain your story. So, you know, I don't know about you, but I needed to go to the bank and get money for my business. I had to explain that. I had to bring other people who I needed to believe in my story to be part of that story, right? And being able to articulate what it is you're trying to do and what that roadmap kind of, that forward plan looks like and where you think those pivot points will be. Because as we know, nothing is fixed. There's no such thing as it's all locked and loaded. We have to be able to make pivots and tactical and strategic decisions along the way. And you have to be able to learn the art of storytelling and creating a narrative that connects people to that story and connects them to what you're trying to achieve because they've got to come along with you. You know, the same with when you're employing people to participate in your business. Or I don't know about you, but I couldn't afford resources full time. So I had to tap into a bit of the gig economy, right? But people in that economy get to make choices about what they will and will not work on. So, you know, convincing people that my piece was really the priority that they would like to work on. I think all of those different learnings I still use today. Like I think they've actually created some of the real fundamental skills I rely on that I see as helping me be successful in the roles I play today.
Yeah, everything you just said then, Sheena, I can also completely relate to. I think the first thing you touch upon is that belief in self. And it's the amount of times I think but also, yeah, strong belief, but you will go through this journey and you will doubt yourself every single week. Am I good enough? Can I do this? It's constant. I'm very grateful that I've got a very good co-founder. And I always say to people that are starting a business, if you can try and get a good co-founder alongside you, I really recommend that, because it's you sort of bounce off each other. When you're having a moment, hopefully they're not. And, you need that sort of cheerleader. You really do need that person in your corner. So I think that whole confidence piece is really important, that self-belief. And I want to actually touch upon that as well. The next bit you mentioned is the risk taking. And I think that when I think about a risk, right, and I love to get your thoughts on this. So if I'm about to do something that's scary or outside my comfort zone, my filter system of like trying to decide whether to do it or not is asking myself the question, would I regret this if I didn't do it? If I future cast myself 10, 20 years into the future, would I regret not doing this? And if the answer is yes, I do it, regardless of the risk, regardless of how challenging it is, because my biggest fear in life isn't fear of failure, isn't fear about what other people think of me. It's fear of regret. So when you're sort of making decisions and when you decide to go for this entrepreneurial challenge, what was your thought process? Because I'm sure you had a really good job, you had probably a stable income. It's really scary to jump into something. It's jumping into the unknown. So how did you find the courage to back yourself? Because so many people say to me, especially women, I want more confidence. And what I say back to them is that first comes courage. You need to learn to back yourself. So you touched on mindset as well, which I think is also a really important ingredient. Can you paint the picture of what you were going through when you were making that decision to take the leap and back yourself? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And likewise, I think I've always been quite a positive person, but I've also reflected on that. I think my mum and my dad are pretty positive people. I grew up in quite an entrepreneurial family where my dad had his own business. And so I think I've always had those sort of insights. But what's really interesting, what you just said then, is that there weren't the opportunities, there wasn't the flexibility. And to be honest, if I reflect back on why my business partner Pam and I started Seed Solutions, it's because we were working at a recruitment company and she had just had a young baby and she had zero flexibility. She had to be in the office 5 days a week from 8:30 till 6:30. So she was literally dropping her daughter off at 7 o'clock in the morning and she wasn't getting back until like 7:30 at night. And she looks back at that and look, that was the reality. She had to work 5 days a week. There was no flexibility. She needed to work to support the family, to pay the rent, etc. But she started the business for exactly the same reason you did, is because there weren't the opportunities for flexibility. And that was the only option at the time. So I am really grateful that the world of work is changing and companies are identifying that they need to support women who want to go off and have a family. Because this is the other thing as well that like is going on in like, you know, people are talking, trying to encourage women to have more children. But I'm like, well, set up the world then to support women to have children because it's not set up. Daycare is extortionate. Superannuation, women aren't getting paid out. Luckily, I think that's starting to change. And when they come back into the workforce, they're not giving any support. They're expected just to come in, pick off where they left off. It needs to change. The system's broken, quite honestly. And we are starting to make some shifts, but not enough, I don't feel, if we really truly want to support women and let them have a thriving career and home life. So I think that it's interesting to hear your story and things have changed, but probably not the rate I'd like to see them change.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just to add to that as well, I think I am a better person, a better leader because I raised my children. There is a whole heap of skills that I have learned with my work at home. And it's really fascinating because we don't tend to attribute that, you know, to our catalogue of skills. I have definitely learned most of my negotiating skills at home, right? I've learned my listening, my real active listening skills at home, because there's so often I come home from work and honestly, I just want to plug in some music and quietly cook dinner. But I have 3 children who all have stories, who all have stuff that they want to get off their chest and things they want to tell me. And I've had to learn to listen, not, oh, yep, that sounds interesting, right? Like actually actively listen. Because what's really fascinating is as they grow older, they test you on whether you're listening because they then ask you some question later. And you were like, hang on a second, I remember some conversation that now needed me to have heard, that I needed to have heard in order to now answer this question. So there are so many skills we learn by the work we do at home around that I think contributes to our leadership skills, and we have to value that. And lastly, I'm super busy, which makes me incredibly good at organizing. I'm very planful, right? Another really important skill, given that my natural leaning is I'm highly flexible and very good at procrastination. But it's interesting because when I tell people that if I did any personality test, that would be my natural leaning, people wouldn't believe that. And the reason why is because I've had to learn to be organized. I have 3 children. I have a full-time job. In those days, I had a business. So, you know, these are just examples, I think, of the catalog of skills that I've learned with the collective things that I've experienced in life, raising children, starting my business, working in management consulting, you know, leading programs and being a senior leader in organizations. It's all of those things together. And I think to your point, the system has got to start recognizing that as a whole.
I completely agree. This is just such an important conversation because I spoke to a woman the other day and she had taken a career break to raise her family and she was really nervous about putting that on her resume. And I was just like, what you've done in that time is invaluable. Like, it is incredible. It is just amazing what you've achieved during that time. You have kept a human being alive, right? That deserves to be celebrated for a start. But it's so true. It's like we need to start valuing this piece of it, because as human beings, we're multidimensional, and all of these experience gives us different perspectives, different skills. It makes us more, like you said, better leaders, probably more empathetic leaders. It makes us have more active listening skills. These are absolutely crucial skills in life and in the workplace. So I think if organizations could identify this and not be like, oh, she's taken 2 years off to raise her kids. Well, yeah, let's hire her, because if she's done that, oh my God, she's going to be incredible in this business. So yeah, it's a really, really powerful conversation. So I'm really pleased that we're having it, Sheena. But get us up to speed now. So obviously you've worked as a management consultant, you've ran your own business, you've got 3 children, which is just like I literally just feel like taking a bow to you right now. And you're in a full-time job. So what does a typical week look like for you at the moment? Get us up to speed with your current role and what that looks like.
Yeah, a typical day. I need to get to a place where I have one of those, I've decided. So earlier this year, so I was working in a startup that West Farmers Health acquired and helping them scale that business, which was really exciting. I've actually decided to not continue on in a corporate role at the moment. I'm working just in more of a consulting role in a couple of different partnerships. One of those is to just do something different. So I don't know about you, but once you're a risk taker, you like a bit of change. I'm very missions oriented. I've decided, actually, this is really interesting. I have to thank Morella Robinson for this one. She actually said to me, "You're very missions orientated," and I was like, "Yeah, actually, I am. I do. Ever since my year 10 experience, I love solving problems. That's my thing, and I tend to lean into that." But this year I've got my final daughter or final child. It's not my only daughter. I've got a son as well. Going to a year 12. And so I've decided that I actually want to be around a bit more. I want to control my hours a little bit more. So it's interesting. We've just had the conversation, right, of creating our business to drive that change. I'm doing that at the moment. And I'm giving my hand, sort of trying my hand at being back in consulting. And one of the reasons why is because I see that our CIOs particularly really need some support. I think the rate of change in technology is really high. I think there are industries that have matured, like financial services, but there's real potential to support our senior executives and leaders, particularly in that CIO space. So I'm really looking forward to, and I am doing that right now, is working with different leaders in the industry where I can help support them in their strategy development, their roadmaps, be a champion for change, and help them accelerate that change. So that's really where I'm participating in right now. And I think some of the experiences that I've had in executing change and seeing the success of that is something that I'd like to bring to the table in supporting other leaders and especially other female leaders. So that's sort of my space that I'm in right now. What that means is that I am spending a little bit more time than I have been in shuttling children around, which is I am taking my daughter to school as often as I can in the morning. And now she's in year 12, but I found that time's been really valuable in having conversations about how she's traveling. And it's not a long drive. And just being able to manage my work a little bit around that as well. So my typical day at the moment is, largely getting up and sorting out and getting kids out the door. I'm also actually really keen on helping, and I can come back and talk to you about this in a minute, but really interested in using this time also with connecting with other women and other tech leaders, spending time in conversation around this idea of confidence, leaning in on the decisions that they're trying to make in the spaces that they're at, making room for helping with mentoring and those areas where I've always been interested, but whenever I have a senior corporate or senior executive leadership role, becomes really challenging to do those other things. So That's what I'm doing right now. And actually, I'm really enjoying myself. Yeah.
Well, I think that's absolutely wonderful. And also, I just want to say that when I was in year 12, I probably needed my mum, not probably, I needed my mum then more than ever before. Navigating those teenage years, hormones, all of that stuff that goes with that. So I take my hat off to you to say that's phenomenal. And that is time very well spent, because I look back on those years with my mum in year 12, and that's when I needed her the most. So that's really, really powerful that you're doing that, and you will not regret that. Because I know that I wouldn't be the woman I am today had I not had my mum's support through those years. So absolutely very important. And we don't get these years back, right, Sheena? Like sometimes you need to check in with yourself, because I think one thing I've done in the past as well, and I'm sure people can relate to this as well, is that you kind of lose yourself in the day-to-day sometimes. And sometimes you need to take a step back and actually remember what is important. And I also am a big believer, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is life comes in seasons and they come in chapters, and it's honoring where we're at. And if you've identified that you're in a season where you want to be more present for your family, you need to honor that, because the worst thing you can do is be like trying to push a corporate role, be in the office from 8 till 8, not seeing your family. You're going to feel sort of out of alignment. And I think that's where a lot of our mental health problems come in, is because we're not being true to ourselves. We're pushing ourselves to do things we don't really want to do, and we're feeling out of balance. So I honor the fact that you have identified that, and you are making work around you. And that's the season you're in, and you're still having so much impact both at home and in the workplace. So I think that's fantastic. So I just want to take a moment to say, well done. I think if more people did that, we'd have less sort of mental health and burnout in the world. So I just want to applaud you for that.
Yeah, and it's never an easy junction, right? Like I think, it does take, to your point, I think, you've just got to stop and check yourself a little bit sometimes. And yes, I can go and get another senior executive role and I will probably put 150% into it and, drive change and build teams, all things I love doing. But I also want to your point, I also love my family dearly. And Emily is my last child in year 12. So from a schooling point of view, this is it for me. This is, and this is probably the child that needs the most support. And I think that's the other thing, is we have to recognize, in our family, different members of our family have different needs. And sometimes, some need us more than others, right? My oldest daughter is really independent. She drives, she works, she's off doing her own thing and living her own life. She probably needs me a lot less than probably my youngest. So, yeah, I guess also though, Georgie, I'm in a really fortunate place where I can make that choice. And, I have to acknowledge that not everybody has that opportunity to make that choice as well. So I've got to recognize that. Also, I mean, I've got some really great people that I'm working with right now. So I get to make this choice, and, I get to have a bit of flexibility, and I also get to get paid and still feed everybody. So, I have to take on board that that's a bit of a luxury as well. Like, it's a real privilege to be in that position. I feel incredibly blessed that I have that.
Absolutely. But I'll add to that you've also created that position. Like that hasn't just happened. And I think we see the iceberg of success and we go, oh, look at Sheena. She's got all this flexibility, this great job, and she's with her family. But you've taken some risks. You've backed yourself. You've accumulated some skills. And that's why now you're able to do this. And I think this is the missing piece that's probably not spoken about enough, is that if we want the flexibility, if we want the well-paid job, if we want the business, we've also got to constantly work on ourselves all the time. And we've constantly got to be learning and growing. So let's talk about that, Sheena, as well, because you've had multiple roles, you've taken some risks, you've started your own business. How important is that whole learning, relearning, and just upskilling yourself piece if you sort of reflect back on the success you've had throughout your working life?
I think it's critical. I actually think it's super critical. And I say this at home, I'm never done with learning. Like, And I think particularly in technology and the roles we play, I obviously can't speak to every function and industry. It does change. And I think if you want to have a really effective and long-lasting career in the industry, you have to be prepared to learn. I don't spend a lot of time on the tools anymore. In fact, I don't spend any time on the tools anymore. But that doesn't mean to say I don't know enough to make critical decisions strategically on things like cloud, on data, on the role of AI, on the impact of digitization, on how we would digitize, on how we would break down, the different ways in which we would iterate and deliver in order to achieve that outcome. And I could easily remove myself from that level of detail and hope that I can ride the wave, right? But the truth is that to be really effective, you have to keep learning. And that's not necessarily, to your point, the technical skills. I don't know, have you read Adam Grant's book? Is it Think Again? Think Again?
I haven't read that. I haven't read that one, but I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got the free audio, the free Audible. You sign up and then suddenly you've got about 5 Audibles you've got to read before you realize that you really need to cancel your membership and read your Audible. So I was listening to Adam Grant. And, Adam Grant talks about this idea of rethinking and relearning, and that, when we go through school, we think that we're done with our learning because, we've learned and then we've set this exam and then that's locked and loaded that learning. But the reality, the truth of it is life is just all about new knowledge, isn't it? It's about curiosity and it's about learning. I'm hugely curious. Like I will constantly pour through, whatever interesting thing that I've suddenly taken a fascination to. And, I love reading. I'm always asking people for what they do. I think the other interesting thing is you can learn so much from others as well. You can learn. I was at a Cancer Council biggest morning tea over the weekend, and one of the women is a criminal lawyer. And so it was fascinating to learn about, just her day-to-day, her job, how she goes about. And she's a defendant and a prosecutor. So she does one or the other, but she plays both roles. So, I guess where I'm going with this is that, so I was saying to her, I literally commandeered her. I became her new best friend. And I was pouring, I was just asking her all these questions. And it was so interesting that I couldn't help myself. But I think, that is a very small example of how our curiosity can really drive so much of our learning. I mean, I know a whole new area of, I guess, a topic that I really didn't know a lot about. I thought I did because, I watch enough crime movies, but probably not necessarily in the way that it is in real life. And so I think it plays such a massive role. I cannot speak enough about, just really tapping into the information that's out there, other people, like, spending time with other people outside of your world as well. I think we can get a little bit confirmation bias, is that the word, in our own bubble as well. So I don't think I'll stop learning as I get older.
I'm with you. there's always a new book to read. There's always a podcast I'm listening to. Like, I'm always thinking as well, where are my gaps? What could prevent me from getting me to where I want to be? Is it my leadership style? Is it my, my knowledge on AI? Is it my knowledge like on Web3? Like, I'm always thinking, okay, what's coming? Where are the pattern? Where are the trends? And what could prevent me from getting to the next step of my goals and my mission? So, but I also think on top of the learning piece, it's also having time to process it. And I don't know about you, Sheena, but when I was like, I'm getting better now at actually just learning to reflect a bit at the end of the day. I used to be very much like in it, like constantly, like just like any opportunity I got, I was just like downloading information, listening to audiobooks, reading, and just constantly like filling my mind. What I've come to realize is actually the processing of it is equally as important as the learning. So just having time and space just a little bit throughout the day, especially at the end of the day, where you're just sort of reflecting on what have I learned and how can I implement this into my life tomorrow or, throughout the rest of the week. So that's been really important for me as well. So otherwise I find I was just getting all this information, but not having the opportunity to process it as well. But it's a really key point that I want to make, because I always say this, but it's so true. Success leaves clues. And I'm always trying to learn from people that have gone on to achieve good success and have happy lives. And what success means to me is somebody who's happy, healthy, not just all about career and business. It's also people that look like they live good lives. And obviously you've got your values intact. You've got a nice family life as well. So it's like, what do you do that enables you to do this? And I think that learning, that curiosity is really, really important. But look, I would just like to sort of step on now. You've mentioned change quite a lot and going into and helping leaders deal with all the change. So what are you sensing in the marketplace right now, working with these tech leaders? Is there fear around what's coming? Obviously, the pace of change is absolutely rapid. How are you preparing people for what's to come over the next sort of, 2-3 years and beyond?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I think, first of all, ways of working, right? We were talking about rethinking and relearning. We've also got to continue to evaluate how we work in the workplace. And that is how how individuals and teams come together to get work done, right? Whether they're projects or particularly collaborative work, because I think that so much of change involves different groups coming together to work together on something like a project or an initiative. And for me, I think communicating what is coming down the pipeline is really important. People like to see a plan. And so I think there are three things that play a role. Well, 4, actually. One is having a clear strategy. And I don't mean the frou-frou stuff, yeah? I mean something that's tangible and tactile that people understand. The second one is then having a plan, right, around that. If we have a strategy, how do we see this plan playing out? So if I look at I love the words forethought and foresight. These are my 2 new words. I'm going to test it on you. So forethought, the definition of forethought is it's a well-considered idea, right? That you've thought it through and it's the things you need for the future. So it's a well-considered set of ideas that you might need for the future. The definition of foresight is then the ability to predict how that plays out. So if we think that our strategy is a well-considered series of ideas about how we're going to, where our organization wants to be or where our technology strategy wants to be, then foresight is having some form of tangible way in thinking about how that plays out, right? To me, that's your plan. Change is about connecting people to that story. And then your ways of working is how you actually break that down in the next level of detail to then rally the troops around that change. Here's where I get a little bit specific. I am a big believer in 12 months, 90 days. You need enough foresight to think about how the 12-month plays out. But the interesting thing about predicting the future, it has a whole bunch of uncertainty attached to it. There's a whole heap of assumptions that we're making, right? The closer we get, though, to 1, 2, 3 months, the more certainty we should have around the things that we're trying to achieve on that roadmap. So I like the idea of having some foresight that's about 12 months, 18 months ahead, and then breaking that into a 90-day plan that has real tangible outcomes that people can sign up to. That the team, whatever your definition of team is, comes together and works on that together, prioritizes that together, and signs up to the outcomes together. Because then when you have pivots, when you have change that needs to occur in that plan, you can bring those same people back and say, we signed up to this. However, here's the thing that's not working. Here's the new thing we've got to do. What are we going to take out of the things that we prioritize to then do the new thing that we've all decided we need to do, right? Horse trading is what I call it. So I think if we want to take people on the journey with us, change is about connecting people to the story and getting their buy-in to be part of that story, being part of the outcome. Now, not everyone, some people will, I suppose, inherit the change, experience the change. Some people will be part of creating the change, right? So even people that are experiencing the change, imagine how much better it is when you can see that roadmap ahead of you and you know that stuff is coming, but then you can see that there's assumptions, that there's a bit of, predictability in that, you're predicting a little bit of that, but then actually the actual thing we're working on that everyone's going to create or experience is here in this 90 days, in these 6 months. And it's consistently reiterating that. Because, I was in a conversation a couple of weeks ago at a conference, and a question came up around this. And this idea of reiterating and re-engaging constantly on that story. We all think that everyone is focused on the thing we're doing. But the truth of the matter is people in different parts of the organization are busy. They've got their thing they're working on, right? So if we want to ensure that we can remind people of the story and remind them of what we've all discussed, then we've got to keep reaffirming and reiterating. And I think that's, for me, those are the ingredients of success in taking people on that journey. Lastly, one more thing is investing in people, like really investing in people's skills, right? Mentoring, training, encouragement. I think they're all like really important things that leaders can do. But as one leader, you can't be doing that for everybody. So you've got to enable and empower your leaders who then enable and empower their leaders, and giving people the autonomy and the freedom to do that, right? To help coach, train, mentor, and grow the teams and the people around them. I think that's such a critical part of managing change and unlocking that success.
I've never actually had somebody describe change in that way before, and it was perfect. And I can see why you are very good at what you do, because you're so right. Like, first and foremost, you've got this big goal, you've a big thing you're working towards, but it's like breaking it down to manageable chunks, bringing people on the journey, saying like, this is where we're going, this is your role, and this is what you're going to contribute to it. This is what you're going to bring, and getting people on the journey with you, bought into that story, is so powerful, because so many people fear change. It's because they're probably like panicked about what it means for their job, what it means for the future. And it's just how we manage people. Like, that change is all about managing people, right? And making sure that they're on board and they know, listen, this is your contribution, this is what it's going to look like, and getting them bought into the outcome that you want to achieve. So I think what you've just said there is just so perfect. So I can understand why you are very good at what you do. But look, in terms of, I guess, what is next for you, Sheena? Like, what are you sort of like, apart from, obviously, I know you've got your family life and you have this amazing job, but like, where do you sort of see yourself over the next sort of few years? Have you got any plans, or, anything you're working on in the background, or you'll be launching another business at some point? Like, what is next for you, do you think?
That's such a good question. I'm actually in a bit of a junction at the moment. And I decided that I'm not going to, because we've just talked about forethought and, this idea of this big plan. I'm going to just write things out this year. I think there is probably another big role that I'm prepared to, not another one big role, but I'm sure there's more than one, but, potentially another big change opportunity. Working with an organization in a senior exec role on something that they are working on, whether it's their 3 to 5 year strategy. I think that's something that's, in my future. At the moment, obviously, I'm working on just advisory right now, and I've partnered with a couple of different organizations to do that, which has been really interesting. And that'll probably be something that I'll really invest in over the next couple of years. And then, look at maybe that next sort of exec gig, I think. Yeah, but it's really interesting, Georgie, you asked me this, right? Because if you asked me this question like 3 or 5 years ago, I probably would have been really definitive. But I honestly have this opportunity to take stock this year because this is my last child in high school. So my life actually does change at the end of this year. I'll have three, two that are already in university and off working. I'll have one on her way to whatever her next step is. When your children leave school, I mean, they don't, they're still part of your family, but you don't have the structures of school life. They tend to have a lot more independence as well because they're off to university or whatever they're doing. So they themselves don't have that structure of, I show up from Monday to Friday between this time, and I have, school holidays between this week and this week. That structure goes away. And I think for me, it opens up just, the ability to think about my next steps differently. I think, yes, I've done lots of different things, and I've taken lots of different risks in my career, but they have been with the constraints of my children going to school, right? But at the end of this year, going into next year will be the first time I don't have that anymore. And so I've decided I'm not going to really lock anything in stone. I'm going to explore different opportunities and see where they take me. How's that?
I think it's the perfect answer. I think you just got to honor that. But I also think that when you have that mindset, opportunities open up to you. And I think it will be very interesting to see what happens for you over the next sort of like year or two and who you sort of start connecting with. And I just think when you're open to things, opportunities come. I think that honestly, the next, whatever you decide to do next, I've got no doubt will be amazing because you have got such a great skill set and you will be an asset to any business or organization that you honestly decide to join. And I truly believe that. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you. And maybe in a year or two's time, I'll have you back on. You'll be in a brand new role. You'll have more insights, more stories, more things to share. But in the meantime, for those that want to find out more about you and connect, where do you hang out the most? Where can I send people?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me. And very quickly on reflection, it's also where I now reflect what I'm learning as well. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about reflections before, and the things that we're sharing, that I'm learning, that I want to share with others, right? And make that information available to others. So it's a great place to connect with me. But also, if you want to, you're also curious about learning, curious about the reflections of the things that we're all learning, that's a great place to find me. It's just Sheena Peeters.
I'll make sure I put all the links below, but thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure for coming on today. And I know the audience will get so much from this because I have. So thank you so much, Sheena. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.